Have you ever looked at someone you weren't supposed to want and felt your entire world shift? That's what happened to me the night Ivy walked through my door. I was 41, a mother, a woman with a life already planned out. And then she smiled at me, and everything I thought I knew about myself began to unravel. I should have known the moment she walked through my door that night something had shifted. Not in the room, not in the air, in me. Ivy arrived the way she always did, with that quiet grace young women sometimes carry without realizing it. She smiled at my daughter, hugged her warmly, and settled into the evening as though she belonged here. And maybe she did belong here as my daughter's friend, as a welcome guest, as someone I'd known for years in that distant, polite way you know the people who orbit your child's life. But that night, something changed. I was setting the table when I caught her watching me. Just a glance, brief and unguarded, before she looked away. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did, and I felt it, a small flutter of awareness I had no right to feel. I told myself it meant nothing. I was 41 years old. A mother. A woman with a life already half-lived and neatly ordered. I didn't have time for foolish thoughts about a girl young enough to be. I stopped that thought before it finished. "Glad you could come, Ivy," I said, keeping my voice steady, warm, the way I always did. The way a good hostess should. She looked up at me, and for just a moment, our eyes held. "Thank you for having me," she replied softly. There was nothing unusual in her words, nothing inappropriate in her tone. But something in the way she said it made my chest tighten. I turned away quickly, focusing on the serving dishes, the wine glasses, anything to anchor myself back into the ordinary rhythm of the evening. But then I had to pass her the salad bowl. Our fingers brushed. It was an accident. A simple, innocent touch that happens 100 times in any shared meal. But the warmth of her skin against mine sent a jolt through me that I felt all the way to my spine. I pulled my hand back carefully, not too fast. I didn't want her to notice my reaction. But I noticed. God help me, I noticed everything. The way her breath caught, just slightly. The way her eyes widened for half a second before she composed herself. The way she looked down at her plate, as though suddenly fascinated by the food. I told myself I was imagining it. Dinner continued. My daughter laughed. Conversation flowed easily around the table. I smiled, nodded, played my part perfectly. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling, because I could feel Ivy's eyes on me. Not constantly, not obviously, but every time I moved, reaching for the water pitcher, adjusting my sleeve, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, I felt her gaze follow. Soft, curious, lingering just a heartbeat too long. I should have been uncomfortable. I should have been alarmed. Instead, I felt alive. It terrified me. Halfway through the meal, I stood to bring more bread from the kitchen. As I passed behind Ivy's chair, I caught the faintest hint of her perfume, something light and floral, sweet in a way that reminded me of spring mornings. It mixed with the scent of my own jasmine perfume, the one I'd worn for years, and suddenly the air between us felt thick with something unspoken. I steadied my hands on the counter in the kitchen, taking a slow breath. "This is nothing," I told myself. "You're reading into something that isn't there." But when I returned to the table, Ivy's eyes found mine again, and this time, I couldn't look away as quickly as I should have. When dinner ended, everyone drifted toward the living room. I began clearing plates, grateful for the distraction, for something practical to do with my hands. "I can help," Ivy said quietly, appearing beside me. I should have declined. I should have told her to relax, to enjoy herself with the others. Instead, I nodded. "All right." We moved into the kitchen together, and suddenly the space felt impossibly small. I was hyper-aware of her beside me, the soft rustle of her clothing, the rhythm of her breathing, the warmth radiating from her body even though we weren't touching. I reached across her to place a dish in the sink, and my arm brushed against her sleeve. Not a touch. Not exactly. just the ghost of one. But it was enough to make my breath falter. "Thank you for coming tonight," I said, needing to fill the silence with something safe, something normal. "It means a lot." "Of course," Ivy replied, her voice softer than usual. I could feel her eyes on me as I rinsed the plates, feel the weight of her attention like a physical thing. My hands trembled slightly under the water. I gripped the edge of the sink to steady them. "Ivy," I said quietly, not looking at her. "Yes?" I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know what I could say, so I said nothing. The silence stretched between us warm, charged, impossible to ignore. I dried my hands slowly, methodically, trying to ground myself in the mundane action. But when I finally turned to face her, Ivy was closer than I expected, close enough that I could see the pulse beating at the base of her throat, close enough that her perfume wrapped around me, soft and intoxicating, close enough that I could feel the heat of her body in the narrow space between us. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain she could hear it. "Helen," she whispered, and the way she said my name, tender, uncertain, full of something I didn't dare name, nearly undid me. I should have stepped back. I should have created distance, should have laughed and made some light comment to break the tension. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, our eyes locked, and in that moment, I saw it clearly. She felt it too. This wasn't my imagination. This wasn't some foolish fantasy I'd conjured in a moment of loneliness. Ivy was looking at me the way I'd been trying not to look at her, with longing, with curiosity, with a desire so raw and honest it took my breath away. A plate clinked in the other room, and the spell shifted, not breaking, just loosening enough for reality to seep back in. I forced myself to move, to reach for a bowl on the counter. Our hands brushed again, more firmly this time, and the contact sent heat racing up my arm. "Careful," I murmured, though neither of us was in danger of dropping anything. It wasn't a warning about the bowl. Ivy understood. I could see it in her eyes. I turned toward the living room, needing air, needing space, needing to escape the overwhelming pull of her presence. But I didn't go far. I stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, trying to collect myself, trying to remember who I was supposed to be. A mother, a responsible adult, a woman who didn't feel these things for someone so young, so innocent, so... "Helen," I turned. Ivy stood in the kitchen doorway, her eyes searching mine. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. No, nothing was okay. Everything had shifted, tilted, cracked open in a way I couldn't explain or control, but I couldn't tell her that. "Yes," I lied gently. "Everything's fine." She didn't believe me. I could see the doubt flickering across her face, the questions she wanted to ask but didn't. We stood there, suspended in the space between truth and pretense, neither of us willing to move forward or step back. And then my daughter called from the living room, asking if we wanted coffee, and the moment shattered. "We should go," I said quietly. Ivy nodded, but she didn't move immediately. She stayed there, looking at me with an expression I would see in my dreams for nights to come, soft, open, full of unspoken longing. Then she walked past me, her shoulder brushing mine so lightly I might have imagined it. Except I didn't imagine the warmth that bloomed where we touched. I didn't imagine the way my heart stuttered. I didn't imagine the way my entire body leaned toward her, even as my mind screamed at me to stay still. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I smiled, I laughed, I played the perfect hostess. But inside, I was falling apart, because I knew, with terrifying clarity, that something had begun tonight, something I couldn't name yet, something I wasn't ready to face. When everyone finally left and the house fell quiet, I stood alone in my kitchen, breathing in the lingering traces of Ivy's perfume mixed with my own. And I let myself admit, just for a moment in the privacy of my own mind, what I'd been denying all evening. I wanted her. Not in some vague, theoretical way. Not in the distant manner you might admire a beautiful painting. I wanted her with a hunger that frightened me. With a longing I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. I pressed my hands to my face, feeling the heat in my cheeks, the rapid beat of my heart. This can't happen, I told myself firmly. This absolutely cannot happen, but even as I thought it, I knew it was already too late. Something had started tonight, something I couldn't stop, even if I wanted to. And the most terrifying part? I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it at all. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every glance, every accidental touch, every heartbeat that had thundered too loudly in the silence between us. I told myself it would fade, that by morning, this strange, overwhelming feeling would have dissolved into something manageable, something I could explain away as loneliness, or stress, or the wine I'd had with dinner. But morning came, and nothing had changed. If anything, it was worse, because now I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way Ivy had looked at me in that kitchen, the softness in her eyes, the way her breath had caught when our hands touched. I pressed my palms against my face, trying to ground myself in reality. She's your daughter's friend, I reminded myself sternly. She's 23 years old. This is inappropriate. This is impossible. This is... My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, heart already racing before I even saw the screen. It was a text from my daughter. "Thanks for last night, Mom. Ivy said she had a really nice time." My chest tightened. Ivy said. What else had Ivy said? Had she noticed the way I'd been looking at her? Had she felt the same electric current I'd felt every time we came close? Or was I completely alone in this madness? I set the phone down without responding, my hands trembling slightly. For 2 days I avoided everything. I didn't text Ivy, I didn't ask my daughter about her. I buried myself in work, in errands, in anything that would keep my mind occupied. But on the third morning, I saw her. I was driving through town, stopped at a red light, when I caught sight of her on the sidewalk. She was walking alone, hands in her pockets, her hair catching the sunlight in a way that made my breath stutter. Before I could think it through, before I could stop myself, I rolled down the window. "Ivy," I called out. She turned, and when she saw me, her entire face brightened. That smile nearly broke me. "Helen," she said, walking toward the car. "Hi, do you need a ride?" The words left my mouth before I could consider whether offering was wise. She hesitated, just for a second, but I saw something flicker in her eyes, uncertainty mixed with something warmer, something that looked dangerously like hope. "Sure," she said quietly. "Thank you." "Where are you headed?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Just into town," she replied. "The bookstore on Main Street." She opened the passenger door and slid in beside me. And suddenly, the car felt impossibly small. My jasmine perfume filled the enclosed space, mixing with the faint scent of her floral perfume. The air between us grew thick, charged with everything we weren't saying. "Seatbelt," I murmured, my voice coming out softer than I intended. Ivy reached for the belt, and as she did, her fingers brushed against my forearm. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent heat flooding through my entire body. I felt her freeze beside me, felt the moment stretch between us, fragile and trembling. "Sorry," she whispered. "I should have said it was fine. Should have laughed it off, made it seem like nothing." Instead, I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my racing pulse. "It's okay." But my voice betrayed me. It dipped lower than usual, softer, more vulnerable than I'd meant it to be. We drove in silence. Not a comfortable silence. Not the easy quiet of two people who knew each other well. This was different. This was a silence filled with awareness, with the unspoken knowledge that we were both feeling something we shouldn't feel. At a stoplight, I let my hand rest on the gear shift. Without meaning to, I glanced down and realized how close Ivy's knee was to mine. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her body. Close enough that if either of us shifted even slightly, we would connect. I forced my eyes back to the road, but my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "There's something in the back seat," I said suddenly, needing to break the tension. "Could you grab it for me?" It was a lie. There was nothing in the back seat, but I needed her to move, needed to create distance, needed to breathe. Ivy turned, leaning back slightly. The movement brought her closer to me, close enough that I felt the warmth of her shoulder, the faint brush of her hair against my arm, close enough that my perfume seemed to concentrate in the narrow space between us. I heard her inhale. It was soft, almost imperceptible. But I heard it, and I knew exactly what it meant. She was breathing me in. The realization sent a shiver down my spine, equal parts fear and desire. The light turned green. A car honked behind us. I blinked, forcing myself to focus, and pressed the gas pedal. But my composure had cracked. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. My breath came shorter than it should have, and Ivy noticed. I could feel her eyes on me, could sense her concern mixed with something deeper. When we reached her destination, I pulled over slowly, reluctantly, as though delaying the inevitable. "Thank you for the ride," Ivy said softly, but she didn't move to open the door. "You're welcome," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. We sat there, suspended in the moment, neither of us willing to end it. I could feel the pull between us, magnetic, undeniable, terrifying. Slowly, against every instinct, screaming at me to look away, I turned toward her. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I saw everything I'd been trying to deny. Ivy wanted me. Not in the innocent way a young woman might admire someone older. Not in the distant way you might respect a mentor or friend. She wanted me the same way I wanted her, with longing, with heat, with a desire so raw it stole the air from my lungs. My gaze dropped to her mouth before I could stop myself, and I saw her lips part slightly in response. Oh God, this was real. This was happening. "I should go," Ivy whispered, but her voice shook, and she didn't move. "Yes," I agreed, my own voice trembling. "You should," but I didn't move either. Another heartbeat passed, then two. The air between us grew heavier, warmer, thick with everything we weren't saying. Finally, Ivy forced herself to reach for the door handle. She opened it, and the rush of outside air broke the spell just enough for both of us to remember how to breathe. But before she stepped out, I heard myself speak. "Ivy." She froze, turning back to look at me. "Come by later," I said quietly. "If you want." The invitation hung in the air between us, fragile, dangerous, impossible to take back. I shouldn't have said it. I knew I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help myself. Ivy's eyes widened slightly. "Okay," she whispered. "I will." She stepped out of the car and closed the door gently. I watched her walk away, my heart pounding, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "What are you doing?" I asked myself. "What are you thinking?" But I already knew the answer. I was thinking about the way she'd looked at me, the way her breath had caught, the way every accidental touch between us had felt like fire. I was thinking that I couldn't stop this, even if I wanted to. And the most terrifying part? I didn't want to stop it. I drove home in a daze, my hands still trembling. The afternoon stretched endlessly. I cleaned obsessively, trying to distract myself. I made tea I didn't drink. I changed my clothes 3 times, telling myself it didn't matter what I wore. But it did matter, because I knew she was coming tonight. As evening fell and shadows filled the house, the doorbell finally rang. I walked to the door slowly, trying to compose myself, trying to remember all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But the moment I opened it and saw Ivy standing there, every rational thought dissolved. "You came," I said softly. I wasn't planning to, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The honesty in her words struck me. She was as conflicted as I was, as scared, as helpless against this pull between us. I stepped back to let her in. The moment she crossed the threshold, my jasmine perfume seemed to wrap around both of us, thick and intoxicating in the enclosed space. I saw Ivy inhale deeply, saw the way her eyes darkened slightly in response. She felt it too. The way scent could become memory, could become desire, could become something far more dangerous than either of us had anticipated. I closed the door behind her, and suddenly we were alone. Truly alone. My daughter was staying at a friend's house tonight, something she'd mentioned days ago that I'd barely registered at the time, but now I was grateful for it. No one in the next room. No guests to maintain appearances for. No distractions to hide behind. Just us. And the unbearable tension crackling in the air between us. I made tea, I said, my voice unsteady. If you'd like some. It was a ridiculous offer. We both knew tea wasn't why she was here. But Ivy nodded. That sounds nice. I led her to the kitchen, the same kitchen where this had all begun, where our hands had first brushed, where I'd first felt the earth shift beneath my feet. I poured the tea with trembling hands, hyper-aware of Ivy watching my every movement. When did you learn to make this? She asked softly. When I was your age, I replied, which feels impossibly long ago. You don't seem old, Ivy said quietly. My hand stilled on the teapot. The silence between us thickened. I turned to face her, my heart pounding. I didn't mean that as a complaint, I said carefully. Just a truth. You don't seem old, Ivy repeated, her voice firmer this time. You seem something else. I took a step closer before I could stop myself. What else do I seem? Ivy's breath trembled. I don't know, she whispered, but I can't stop noticing you. The confession hung in the air between us, raw, honest, devastating. My chest tightened. Every defense I'd built over the past 3 days crumbled in an instant. Ivy, I breathed, her name escaping my lips like a prayer and a warning all at once. She stood up slowly, closing the distance between us. We were only inches apart now, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body. Close enough that my perfume wrapped around both of us like a secret. I've been trying not to think about you, I admitted, my voice barely audible. I've been trying so hard. Has it worked? Ivy asked softly. A single tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of everything I'd been holding back. I brushed it away quickly, embarrassed. But Ivy saw it. And in her eyes, I saw understanding, tenderness, a reflection of my own desperate longing. No, I whispered. It hasn't worked at all. Ivy moved closer just one more step. But it was enough to steal the breath from my lungs. I could feel her warmth through my clothes now, could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing. My hands trembled at my sides, wanting to reach for her but terrified of what would happen if I did. Helen! Ivy whispered. The way she said my name, tender, uncertain, full of longing, nearly undid me completely. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw everything I'd been trying to deny. This wasn't wrong. It didn't feel wrong. It felt like the most honest thing I'd experienced in years. I don't know what to do with this, I admitted, my voice breaking. With you. Neither do I, Ivy said softly. But I'm here anyway. We stood there, suspended in the impossible space between restraint and surrender. Every part of me wanted to close the distance, to touch her, to stop fighting this overwhelming pull. But fear held me back. Fear of what people would think, fear of hurting her, fear of losing control of the life I'd so carefully constructed. I'm scared, I whispered. So am I, Ivy replied. But she didn't step back. And neither did I. Instead, we stayed there in that fragile, trembling moment, two people balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. And as I looked into Ivy's eyes, I realized something that terrified me more than anything else. I was already falling, and I had no idea how to stop. The silence stretched between us, warm and charged with everything we weren't saying. I knew I should step back, should create distance, should do the responsible thing and send her home before this went any further. But I couldn't move. Ivy's eyes searched mine, looking for permission, looking for an answer to a question neither of us had dared to ask aloud. My breath came faster now, shallower, betraying every emotion I was trying to contain. "Tell me to leave," Ivy whispered, her voice shaking. "If you want me to go, tell me now." It would have been so easy. 3 simple words. "Please, go home." But I couldn't say them, because they would have been a lie. "I don't want you to leave," I admitted, the words escaping before I could stop them. Something shifted in Ivy's expression, relief mixed with fear, desire mixed with uncertainty. She lifted her hand slowly, hesitantly, reaching toward me but not quite touching. I watched her fingers hover near my face, trembling in the narrow space between us. "Can I?" she started, but her voice faltered. I knew what she was asking, and I knew that if I said yes, there would be no going back. But I was so tired of fighting this, so exhausted from pretending I didn't feel what I felt. I leaned forward just barely, just enough. Permission given in the smallest of movements. Ivy's fingertips touched my cheek, feather-light and devastating. I closed my eyes at the contact, a soft sound escaping my throat before I could stop it. Her touch was gentle, reverent, as though she were afraid I might disappear if she pressed too hard. "Look at me," she whispered. I opened my eyes, and the intensity in her gaze nearly broke me. "I see you," Ivy said softly. "I see you, Helen. Not as my friend's mother, not as someone I'm supposed to keep at a distance. I see you as you." Tears pricked at my eyes. No one had looked at me like this in so long. No one had really seen me in years. I'd been a mother, a caretaker, a responsible adult playing the role expected of me. But Ivy saw something else. Someone else. She saw the woman I'd forgotten I could be. "Ivy," I breathed, her name catching in my throat. And then, before I could overthink it, before fear could stop me, I closed the distance between us. Our foreheads touched, first gentle, tentative, testing. Ivy's hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, her fingers tangling softly in my hair. I felt her breath against my lips, warm and unsteady. My hands found her waist, pulling her closer with a need I couldn't contain anymore. "Helen," she whispered against my mouth. And then, we were kissing. Soft, slow, tender, in a way that made my chest ache. It wasn't hungry or desperate. It was reverent. It was honest. It was everything I'd been denying myself for 3 agonizing days. Ivy's lips moved against mine with a gentleness that nearly destroyed me. Her hand tightened in my hair, not pulling, just holding me there as though afraid I might pull away. But I wasn't pulling away. I was falling deeper. I kissed her back with everything I'd been holding inside, all the longing, all the fear, all the desperate, terrifying need I'd tried so hard to ignore. When we finally broke apart, both of us were trembling. Our foreheads pressed together, our breaths mingling in the small space between us. "Oh God," I whispered, reality crashing back over me. "What are we doing?" "I don't know," Ivy admitted, her voice shaking. But neither of us stepped back. My hands were still on her waist. Her fingers were still tangled in my hair. We stayed there, holding each other in the aftermath of that kiss, neither of us willing to let go. "I didn't plan this," I said softly. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Neither did I," Ivy replied. "But I'm not sorry it did." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth in her eyes. She meant it. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't ashamed. And, God help me, neither was I. "I want more than I should," I confessed, my voice barely audible. "So do I," Ivy whispered back. The admission hung between us, dangerous and beautiful and terrifying. I pulled her closer, wrapping my arms around her fully now, no longer trying to maintain distance or propriety. Ivy melted into me, her head resting against my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. We stood there in my kitchen, holding each other as though we'd been doing it for years. And in that moment, everything else fell away. The fear, the guilt, the impossible complications. All that mattered was this: the warmth of her body against mine, the softness of her breath, the overwhelming rightness of finally letting myself want something. "Stay with me," I whispered into her hair. "Just for tonight. Let me hold you." Ivy nodded against my shoulder. "Okay." I led her to the living room, and we sat together on the couch, our bodies pressed close, my arm wrapped around her shoulders. It wasn't explicit, it wasn't rushed. It was simply us, together. Finally honest about what we felt. Ivy's head rested on my shoulder, and I pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "I don't know where this goes," I admitted quietly. "I don't know how to navigate this." "We'll figure it out," Ivy said, her fingers lacing through mine. I looked down at our joined hands, at the way they fit together so perfectly, and felt something in my chest crack open. Hope. Terrifying, beautiful hope. "I'm choosing this," I said softly. "I'm choosing you. Not because it's easy, but because I can't imagine walking away." Ivy lifted her head to look at me, and the emotion in her eyes nearly broke me. "Then don't walk away," she whispered. And I kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, with the full weight of my decision behind it. This was real. This was happening. And for the first time in 3 days, I stopped fighting it. I let myself fall. We stayed like that for hours, wrapped in each other's warmth, talking in soft voices about everything and nothing. Ivy told me about her dreams, her fears, the parts of herself she rarely showed anyone, and I opened up in ways I hadn't in years about the loneliness I'd been carrying, about the woman I'd lost somewhere along the way to becoming a mother, about the fear of wanting something that didn't fit the life I'd built. "You haven't lost yourself," Ivy said gently, her hand cupping my face. "You're right here. I can see you." Tears slipped down my cheeks, and this time I didn't try to hide them. Ivy wiped them away with her thumb, her touch so tender it made my heart ache. "Stay tonight," I whispered. "Please." "I'm not going anywhere," she promised, and she didn't. We fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, my jasmine perfume mingling with her floral scent until I couldn't tell where I ended and she began. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt whole. Not because someone had completed me, I'd never needed that, but because someone had seen me, had chosen me, had looked past every reason this shouldn't work, and decided I was worth the risk. As I drifted off to sleep, Ivy's heartbeat steady beneath my palm, I let myself ask a question I'd been too afraid to voice. What if this is exactly what I've been waiting for? What if she's exactly who my heart needed all along? The answer came not in words, but in the way Ivy's arms tightened around me in her sleep, in the way my body relaxed against hers, tension I'd carried for years finally releasing, in the quiet certainty that whatever happened next, whatever complications we'd face, this moment right here, right now, was exactly where I was supposed to be. The scent of jasmine wrapped around us both, no longer a warning or a temptation, just a memory we were creating together. The beginning of something neither of us could have predicted, but both of us desperately needed. And as sleep finally claimed me, I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to fall. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt a pull so strong towards someone that every rational thought told you to walk away, but your heart refused to listen? Have you ever chosen love even when it was complicated, forbidden, or impossible? That's what Helen and Ivy did. And maybe, just maybe, you have a story like this too. If this story moved you, Hit subscribe and like this video. Share it with someone who understands the courage it takes to follow your heart. And in the comments, tell me, what moment between Helen and Ivy touched you most deeply?